Hi, folks. This is Dr. Rob Cywes, the Carb Addiction Doc, and I get a lot of questions from people on some form of ketogenic diet who've lost a ton of weight, they resolved a lot of their illnesses, but guess what? They're stranded, they're stuck, they've leveled off. They may have gained some weight back, they're still doing everything right in terms of the ketogenic diet. And what that means is they're not eating carbohydrates. They may be on a net carbohydrate diet, and we've already discussed the fallacies of this in a previous episode. Please go back and look at my discussion about net carbs versus total carbs. It should always be total carbohydrates. Net carbohydrates don't count. However, the people that stall out on a ketogenic diet, they've done well, they're just right there, but they want to be here in terms of their weight, are people who are so focused on what they're eating that they don't understand that changing how we eat is as important as what we eat. And part of the way in which we are raised in a carbohydrate or a standard American diet is we are raised to eat preemptively. We get told we have to eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and now by some bizarre, I'm not even sure why the hell we did this. Well, I kind of know. We've introduced snacking into our environment that was never prevalent at all. But everybody believes you have to eat 3 meals a day, you have to have some snacks, and breakfast is the most important meal of the day. And you have to eat before you exercise because you've got to have the energy there. Those are all critically important when you're on a standard American or a high carbohydrate diet because you run out of sugar so easily. But if you're on a ketogenic diet, you really want to abandon the word diet and make this a way of life. And it's not about being on a ketogenic diet, it's a transfer away from eating preemptively for the pleasure, for the emotional enjoyment of the food, and crossing that threshold where you're eating and drinking again and establishing a ritualized routine where you're eating for the nutritional value of the food and you're eating nutritionally for the body, not the brain. Now, eating preemptively is something we're raised to do. It's the finish your plate club. It's here's your portion of food because we're so fixated on calories and portions. And I'm looking for you to abandon the word macro, the word calorie, the word portion control, and the word I have to eat. Specific meal times. Get rid of those. Throw those in the garbage can. They belong with diets, and 98% of diets fail. So how do we change how we eat? The first thing is returning to an environment where your body tells you how much it needed rather than your brain trying to tell your body how much you think it should need. And the way you do that and the way you break that habit is to buy into the biologic feedback systems that are genetically and evolutionarily predetermined in our body. And there are two sets of receptors that tell us when we've had enough. The first ones are the stretch receptors of the stomach. So any rapid change in the size of the stomach sends a nerve-mediated feedback through Eagle's receptors to the brain that says, I'm full. But that can actually be a massive amount of food. So that has to be used in conjunction with a hormonal feedback system that is measured or mediated by the leptinoid system. There are 4 or 5 different hormones in the GI tract at various levels. And then there's a hormone that comes from your fat cells. So the point there is that it's saturated fat that is our feedback satiety hormone. So understanding those two pieces, what you want to do is manipulate that system so that you feel full on a much, much smaller amount of food. And the concept there is eating sequentially. So what does that mean? Because we want to break the preemptive thought of eating. Most people will prepare food as to how much they think they need. They'll put it in front of them and they'll finish it even though they are now stuffed. In other words, they're able to override those stretch satiety signals, and especially if they eat very quickly, they're able to eat a much larger amount of food before the hormonal leptinoid pathway has had a chance to have effect. So how do you restore a beneficial medium of eating? Number one, your liver gives you breakfast. You do not need to eat it. Breakfast is the least important meal of the day. Ask any diabetic about the dawn effect. As soon as you wake up, your liver squeezes a bunch of sugar into your bloodstream because you're now being active. Think about a car that's been idling in the driveway overnight. Now you jump, that's you sleeping. Now you jump into your car and you put it in first gear and you drive off, or you put it into gear and you drive off. Well, the first thing the engine does, or the car does, is it injects fuel into the engine because you're now going to do work. The liver does exactly the same thing. It gives you breakfast. So maybe have a cup of coffee or something like that just to get you going, but you do not need to eat breakfast. Your liver is giving you preformed sugar calories and ketone calories to start your day. And that spike and rises, that rises and goes down for about 2 to 4 hours after you've woken up. Whether you exercise or not, it is irrelevant. Your body will provide. Somewhere between 4 and 6 hours after waking up, you may begin to get hungry. But if you've got a lot of ketones floating around, if you're in fat-adapted ketosis, even then you don't get very hungry. So the goal there is to push through and not eat while your body is feeding you. And it's only when your body says, hey, I have no more food for you, that you want to put food in your face. That may be sometime in the early afternoon. It may even be in the evening. It may even be the next day. That's not fasting, folks. That's just not eating because your body is supplying your nutrition from your short-term stores. So at some stage, you're going to want to eat and listen to your body, not your brain. The commonest time your brain wants to eat is when the pace of your day changes. That's an emotional response. But there'll be times through the day when your body says, hey, I need to eat. That might be in the middle of the afternoon. It might be in the early afternoon, maybe in the evening. You'll recognize that. And once you recognize that, you can establish that as a paradigm. You can establish that as a pattern. I don't call meals by their names. I call it my first or my second meal. And most people should plan 2 meals a day. But sometimes they may not need that first or that second meal, so they end up having 1 meal a day. 2MAD and OMAD is a reasonable way to live. Very, very few people need to eat more often than twice a day. And some people can only eat every other day. So anywhere in that range is absolutely fine. You set that on yourself, but you should never purposefully starve yourself. Never purposefully starve yourself. Now, the next principle to undo mind eating is to sit at a table with a plate of food and a knife and fork. In other words, isolate yourself when you eat so that that is what you're doing. You're not sitting in front of the computer. You're not driving your car while you're eating, because under those distracted conditions, you're going to ignore all the satiety signals. You are primed to overeat. You're going to overeat. So carve out some time to sit at a table with a plate of food and a knife and fork and eat a meal. The next setup to break the mind, I need to eat this amount of food, the portion control, is always make, if you can, or dish up or have more food than you can possibly eat. In other words, take overeating out of the equation by having too much in front of you if you can. But don't put the food right here in front of you. Put the food in the middle of the table. It is the table's food. And whether as a family, everybody's dishing up from that, there's a lot of cultures that do that. Have an empty plate in front of you. And you start out with an empty plate. You dish up a tiny amount onto that empty plate. And the next thing that you can do is spend a little bit of time preparing that small amount of food. I always have a salt shaker and I put some salt on that food. It slows me down. The second thing is I'll sometimes have some olive oil or some butter or some fat-enriched condiment, maybe some grated cheese that I put on that bite of food. It slows me down. People say, oh, put down your fork and count to 30 seconds. There's no way on God's earth I'm ever going to do that. I'm a carnivore. I eat like a Rottweiler having breakfast. So very quickly. So the way I slow myself down, and the way I suggest you slow yourself down, is by staying busy. You stay busy dishing up that small piece. You stay busy adding a bit of salt and maybe adding some fat fortification to the food. And then you cut the food up with your knife and your fork and you eat it. The knife and fork avoids shoveling food into your face very quickly. You can then go back and forth as often as you want to, because every time you go back again, Your plate's empty, so I'm okay, my plate's empty, but you're asking yourself, does my body really need more? Not I need to eat this amount, but does my body need more? And you can go back and forth, seconds, thirds, fourths. I don't care how often you go back and forth. But at some point, you're going to get to a stage where your body says, hey, I'm beginning to feel full. You've slowed down. You're giving those stretch receptors a chance to work. You're giving your leptinoid receptors a chance to work because now your body's busy seeing and absorbing some of that saturated fat, which is your signaler. And you say to yourself, you know what? I'm starting to get full. I don't know if I've had enough yet. Give yourself a 1 minute break. Go put some dishes in the dishwasher. Let the dog outside to pee. Go get the mail. Throw the laundry in the laundry basket. Leave the food on the table. Come back, sit down after 1 or 2 minutes, and ask yourself, how do I feel? And invariably, that emotional distraction of moving away now allows your body to dictate whether you are still hungry or not. And invariably, because of that leptinoid response, you're going to say, hey, you know what, I'm kind of done. Put the food back in the fridge. If not, if you feel like more, sure, go ahead and eat more. It's not a crime to eat more. But that way you allow your body to tell you how much you needed rather than your brain to tell you how much you think you need. Now, the food's in the fridge. If you absolutely need to go back there an hour or two later, sure, go back. But inevitably, you're not going to want more steak or more chicken. Because once you're full, and that fullness lasts a very long time. As long as also there are no carbohydrates, no sugar and starch on that food. And the final piece of this is to convince yourself that I'm going to be okay for a very long time. And as you get into this pattern, you'll know when your next meal is going to happen. And if you plan ahead, if you know what you're going to eat and how that's going to look, you're going to be just fine. Remember this, how you eat and how you change how you eat is more important, or at least as important, as what you eat. The what you eat is very simple, no carbohydrates. I don't care what the hell you eat on the other side, more vegetarian, more carnivore, up to you. But it's about not eating carbohydrates and then focus on the pattern of eating and get your body accustomed again to controlling how much you eat. Take that control from your brain and pass that on to your body. You have no idea how much water you need to drink. You should not need to know how much water you drink. You start to drink water, it might be 1 glass, 2 glasses, 3 glasses. At some point, a signal goes from your belly to your brain that says you've had enough and you automatically stop drinking water. The same can be reconditioned to eating food. When food fills you up, both in terms of satiety of stretch as well as satiety of chemistry. And I can guarantee you the journey of weight loss and health restoration will continue and is sustainable for the rest of your life because your sustainability comes from having enough. I hope this helped. Check me out on Instagram as well. Follow me there, Carb Addiction Doc. And if this has value, search us out on Patreon. It's patreon.com, Carb Addiction Doc, and become a member. Good luck with becoming a ketogenarian, adopting a keto way of life rather than being on a keto diet.